So they were looking for ways to solve that or to actually get their kids off the screens. So I started thinking about what could be done. And then I realized that back in the day, before social media, before we had gadgets, our childhood was equally fun, if not more fun, but we didn't have phones. So how were we spending our times then? So I thought maybe we should revisit some of those cultures that we used to have back then, and we can bring them back. If they were fun then, they still can be fun. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And maybe before I go into that, let me just hasten to say that for parents who've got kids who spend much time on their phones, it's important to always check the phones. So you could check.
First things first, to check the phones.
Check the phones.
Okay.
So just find out what are they doing on the phones, what are they watching, because the information that we get through our gadgets is uncensored. So as an adult, you will then decide that this is not good for me, and then you put it aside. But that decision can be hard for a child. So it's important for a parent to then check their history, look at what they've been watching, look at what they've been up to, so that you can actually intervene. Because sometimes we wait till things are really bad for us to then notice and then come on board and try to help. And sometimes it will be late because maybe they would have already gotten addicted to the wrong type of things or content, and helping them then will be more difficult. And I think I've said this ad nauseum. I've said that we should always try to avoid nursing gadget addictions. So when a child is still young, kanaka chema, we just through our phone to them and say, kanaka to tamba phone papa, I not do it at 10 hours. And we're talking about it like it's a cool thing. But what we don't realize is that it's an addiction that at some point you will then want to get rid of it, but it will be very difficult. While doctor achieve their homework and they don't want to be doing their homework, they want to be on the gadgets. You now want them to be doing something productive, and they don't want that. They always want to be on their gadgets. So let's talk about the book and toy concept. What exactly is it? So back in the day, I remember we used to have storytelling times. Time yengano chayo, we would go to my granny's place, and then we would all look forward to the time when she would then tell us ngano. And the funny thing is, she didn't have like many. I think about 5 or even less. And we would actually go there and say, Chimboti, it's something that she would always say, but for a reason, we just loved it. Would gather around her and then would listen to that story. So I realized that even now, kids love that. Of course, it's no longer just your traditional ngano, but there are books that you can read to kids, and it stimulates their imagination. Because when you read these books, they're now imagining and they're asking questions and they're so engaged. And in the process, you've actually taken them away from their gadgets. So that culture of storytelling, that culture of reading books is very important. It's something that we need to bring back. It's something that we need to inculcate in our children. It's not only good for them because they enjoy it, but you're also training them to love education, even when it comes to their school books. Now they're used to books. I remember when I was, I think in primary school, I would go to the library and there was a kids section. And you'd find some little kids there, and those sections would be well stocked, and the kids would be there and reading. Now I still sometimes go to the library, and I rarely find kids in the library because that culture is already gone. So it's important to bring it back, to just teach kids to love reading. Because in the process, when now they need to be serious, they're already used to a serious environment. With most of our kids these days, because of the way that we've raised them, it's very difficult for them to focus. They want to be like all over.
The attention span has even really gone. So it's way shorter now.
It's way shorter. And part of the reason is how we've actually, how we're raising them, how we're grooming them. So we need to go back to that time and inculcate reading culture. And then toys themselves, I'm just reminiscing, thinking about back in the day. One of the greatest, if not the most common toy that we all had was outside. So there was that time, and then and then you would go there and then you would figure out like what to do. You would improvise, you would use your imagination, you would get bricks, they become your buses and cars, and then you start moving around.
Nema
tires, yeah. Those are some of it was very dangerous. I remember there's one thing we used to do. So you know those very big tires, I think tractor tires.
Yeah.
So you would get in the tire, like inside, and then waka wanda. So the other guys would be pushing the wheel, and then they would let it go. So you'll be in there and you've absolutely no control. There's no way to break it. There's no way to control it. The tire will just roll down the road, reaching going. Just that back in the day, and we never really got into trouble. And for listeners out there who are as old as I am, I'm sure you can remember this. And this playing with toys, it helped with creativity and imagination, because now you are out there and you have to imagine, okay, what we're going to do, what games are we going to play, and then you had to agree on the rules. We would play soccer sometimes, we would play tennis and all that, but with our own rules. So we would agree on the rules. Putting a personal reference, you would say, if this happens, it means this. If that happens, it means this. And then sometimes there'll be arguments. You'd learn how to do, what do you call it, conflict resolution and all of that.
Yeah.
So these are things that you would learn like in the playground, because that time was there and it was fun. So it's something that we also need to like bring back and say, and give kids an opportunity to just play without phones. So you've taken their phones, you've taken their screens, and they're just outside and they're just learning to play. And the other thing here is pets. So I know that not everyone is into pets, but for kids, they can teach them responsibility. When you have a dog or you've got a cat or you've got something, you're going to take care of them, you're going to bath them, you're going to clean for them. And whilst you're doing that as a kid, you're actually learning a responsibility. You're learning patience, and you've got someone or something to play with. I remember I used to love birds a lot. So I would get them, like, those house sparrows. Normally you would have them like around the house. So I would get the house sparrows, put them in a cage, and then there are also those little ones that I used to love. I'm forgetting the name. I think blue waxbills, the tiny little ones, to see Sinish one.
Yeah.
Then I would put them like in a cage, and then I would learn how to feed them. So at school, I would go into the library and get some books on birds just to read around and see, okay, now I have them. What do I need to do to know it? Say. So in the process, you're discovering more about yourself and you're getting engaged. You'll be so busy reading a book, trying to find out, because you feel like my bed is sick, so what do I do? So whilst you're doing that, you are engaged, and at the same time you're away from the screen. So I'm thinking it's something that we could also do even now, like just get a pet. You don't have to get something that's difficult, obviously, to take care of, but something that will just teach kids responsibility. And then there are board games, like you're playing cards, and then there are games like Sling Park, all of those. One thing I like about these games, because I've experimented with them. So I have this book and toy events at the office where kids they come over, and then we play all these games, we do all these activities. And then I also experiment at home with family, and I've also given to some families, and they play the games and they actually realize it's fun. Not only is it fun, but it gets to create bonds between parents and children, because you can play together, and then you're going to shout. Kanamuna, are serious in a tense environment. There are many assumptions you can make about people. You'd say, wait until you switch on the radio, and then her favorite music is on, and you'll be surprised.
Is this the same level?
Is this the same level? So this is what happens when you've got games, when you've got that relaxed environment. The things that people would do, the things that people would say that you didn't know about, that you never imagined they could do or could say. So in that process, now you are developing bonds, and you're also developing communication skills, because in the process, a child is going to say something, and then maybe you don't like it, and then you've got an opportunity to identify, it's a gap. I had not taught my child how to politely disagree, or how to diplomatically their views which are different from mine. So you identify those gaps and you've got an opportunity to actually teach them. So this happens because you're playing together. I know that we're now living very busy lives, and if we do not plan, if we do not intentionally create time to play and to be with the kids, you may realize that in a year you'll not have that time at all because you're just busy. And then this is what then happens. Kana mwana maybe a teenager, they do something and you're like, wangwa adaroku, what happened? But they've always been like that, but you never had an opportunity to discover it early. So this is what games would do. And I really encourage, most of these games I'm talking about are very affordable. They're not expensive. They're games that you can just get and you bring them home and then you play. I think even for adults, Mungorima adults also, sometimes it's important to just cool off, play these games. And some of them, my exercises, because sometimes you don't exercise, because nowadays I know there are some schools where there are no sports, there are no extracurricular activities. It's just academic. So you need to then give your child like a break when they are home and give them some form of physical activity to do. It's good for their health, it's good for their for their mind as well. And then now that I've talked about the general concept, let me just talk about maybe the specifics, some of what I do, like when kids come over, when we're having a book and toy day. So there's something I love creating stories, and I use them. I use AI to create the story. So you know how now it's very easy to write a story like in seconds using AI tools. So what I do is I write stories that involve the kids who would have come.
The names of the kids.
The names of the kids, the ages of the kids.
Wow.
Some would have brought their siblings, so I write that. And then I write stories about maybe an activity that they will do. Maybe they're going to play in the sand and I'm going to ask them to build castles, sand castles, things like that. So I create a story like that and then I ask them to read. And whilst they're reading, they discover they're in the story. And then you know, sometimes kids, when especially the little ones, they get sort of confused. They now don't know if they actually did it, if they're supposed to do it or something like that. So after reading the story, they then go maybe to the sand castles and they're now trying to recreate what they would have like read from the story that I would have created for them. So in their minds, that's fun, and it teaches them to be creative, and it also teaches them just to love books, because this is not just an ordinary story that they're reading, but it's a story about themselves. And then they're also imaginative. They also want to write their own stories, and I take them through the process of writing their own stories. So at the end of the day, you start a program at 9, you finish at 4, they're still engaged, and for the first time they realize they can actually survive without phones. There's fun outside phones, so which is the whole idea. And then sometimes we actually have a book club discussions. So they have read books and then they get to share the stories that they would have read in the different books. So in the process, they're learning to be confident, they're learning to speak, to communicate, because they have to communicate and say, okay, this is what I read, the book that I read was about this animals, or was about this person, and then they share, and then the other kids ask questions. So basically this is what the book and toy concept is about. And my encouragement to parents is try as much as possible to get your kids engaged in activities that do not need the screens, that do not need television sets, phones and all that. Because if you don't do that, your kids will end up spending too much time on the phones. And we may not have known, but there are effects. Some of them we will discover like maybe in the next 5 to 10
when you're now
years.
trying to get them to read, to study, and you're now complaining, why are you always on your phone? Have you studied? So as you said, let's not nurse phone addiction. Really, really helpful book and toy. We're also live on Facebook. Coach Tafadzwa, your details and any other information you may want to share.
All right, so I prefer WhatsApp. My WhatsApp number is 0773 606 728. I'll give it for the last time, 0773 606 728. And if you're interested in some of the games that you can play with your kids, or bringing your kids over to some of our book and toy events, feel free as a parent to contact me on that number that I've just given.
Coach Tafadzwa, thank you so much for your time. It is the Morning Galaxy on Star FM.